A forest usually tells you what kind of place it is before you take 10 steps. Gravel shifts under your boots at the turnout. The trail register box leans a little from weather. A child points at a map with one finger. And somewhere beyond the first line of trees, a thrush keeps its rhythm as if your morning belongs there too. You have seen places like this all your life. In your state, in your county, near your highway, the beginning always looks ordinary. There is a boardwalk slick with dew, or a packed dirt path with roots crossing it, or a shoulder where trucks and rental cars stand side by side, while coffee cools in cup holders. Nothing asks for fear, then the small sounds stop. Birds cut off in the middle of a pattern, insects fall quiet. Even the leaves seem to hold still, for a second longer than weather should allow. The same trees remain. That is the moment older instructions begin to matter, not later when a person is already lost, and not after dark when searchlights are sweeping ridges, but at the first clean break between a living forest and one that has gone still around you for a reason you cannot see. That is when the ordinary place becomes something else. For a long time, Americans were taught to file those instructions under folklore, as if native people were speaking in symbol when they were often speaking as residents of exact landscapes. They knew which creek bottoms carried fog too fast, which hollows bent sound, which ridges drew weather, and which silences arrived before trouble. They were not decorating the woods with stories. They were naming conditions. Across tribal homelands, the warning is often practical in the same hard way. If the woods change, you change with them. If a place feels wrong, you leave. If a voice comes from the tree line after dark, you do not answer. If a whistle comes back from somewhere you cannot place, you do not repeat it. If tracks or movement lead you off the path at the exact moment the birds go quiet, you do not follow. That is not superstition, it is field instruction. The important part is the level of detail. Elders did not say only be respectful, or stay humble, or remember the old ways, though they said those things too. They said turn back, stay on the trail. Do not call out, do not separate. Do not keep walking simply, because the map says the way forward is still open. A warning that specific usually comes from repetition. Your national parks sit inside older homelands, older roots, older names, and older memories than the signs at the entrance can hold. The National Park Service now states plainly that indigenous history and heritage are part of all national parks. And in the Smokies, it says the eastern band of the Cherokee Indians has deep ancestral ties to the land now called Great Smoky. Mountains National Park, in other words. Many of the places you visit for scenery were already known in a stricter way by the people who lived with them. So when an elder warns that silence means leave, the force of that warning does not come from myth. It comes from the fact that the speaker belongs to the place in a way a weekend visitor does not. They know what the forest sounds like when nothing is wrong. Briefly, that is everything. There is another reason these warnings survive. They continue to match modern reports too closely. A parked car at a trailhead. A short separation. A voice, a ridge, a turn, a rise in the ground, a patch of trees. And then a gap that does not close even after helicopters, dogs, rangers, volunteers, and days of organized search. The old instruction is not old because it expired. It is old because people kept needing it. If this is the kind of record you come to Page of Panic for, subscribe and stay. Because the last case returns to one simple instruction from native country that still fits your forests and your parks better than most official advice ever will. Start in the Smokies because millions of people do. Families park below overlooks, children tap railings with sticks, and the clouds sit low enough on some mornings to make every slope seem closer than it is. Your memory of the place is probably gentle. For the Cherokee, it is not borrowed scenery. The Smokies are part of a homeland with deep ancestral ties. And the highest point in the park now formally bears its Cherokee name again, Kewohi, a sacred place, and the highest point within the traditional Cherokee homeland. A mountain can be famous to tourists and still be older than the names they brought. That matters because older residents notice different thresholds. In Cherokee country, warnings about certain places in the woods are rarely framed as entertainment. They are about boundaries, about not answering what you cannot identify, about not following what moves just far enough ahead to keep you coming, and about turning around when a place begins to feel wrong before you can prove why. Keep walking, and you may be trusting your curiosity more than the land. On a map, the Smokies are full of named routes that look manageable. On the ground, rhododendron closes in, coves hold shadow longer than ridges, creeks cover small sounds, and a slope that seems open from one angle becomes a wall of laurel from another. It happens fast. That is why the old instruction is never abstract. A person does not have to believe in anything unusual to understand the rule. Sound changes, distance lies. Human voices bend in timber, tracks double back. A familiar place becomes technical the instant you stop listening to what it is telling you. Leave then, not later. Look at one of the park's unsolved records. The National Park Service lists Thelma Pauline Melton, known as Polly, as missing from Great Smoky Mountains National Park since September 25, 1981. She was 58 years old, hiking the Deep Creek Trail, and her companions lost sight of her as she walked ahead at a faster pace. That is an ordinary setup. A maintained trail, daylight, known companions. One person moving only a little faster than the others. Then the wrong gap opens, and no one can say with confidence what crossed it. Or take Teresa Trenny Gibson. The National Park Service says she was 16 and disappeared on October 8, 1976. While hiking with a high school group back from Andrews Bald Trail to the parking area at what was then called Clingman's Dome and is now Kewohi again. She vanished on the return, not in some unknown backcountry basin, but while closing out a school, outing on a well-known mountain. That detail deserves more attention than it usually gets. Most people expect danger to announce itself with bad weather, injury, or obvious remoteness. Instead, many disappearances begin while a person is almost back, almost seen, almost where they were expected to be. The old warnings understand that kind of place very well. Cherokee instruction, like most indigenous instruction about land, asks for obedience before explanation. You do not wait for the woods to justify the feeling they give you. You do not demand evidence before turning around. If your section of forest falls quiet, and your own thoughts begin telling you that one more minute or one more bend is harmless, that is exactly when you stop trusting yourself. Search records never write it that way. They speak in distances, clothing, times, last known points, probable routes, weather, terrain, and manpower. That language is necessary. It is also incomplete. A report can tell you a person walked ahead, lagged behind, stepped off the route, or was last observed near a trail junction. It cannot easily capture the smallest decision before that, the pause after hearing something, the choice to see what changed, the extra few yards taken into timber because the silence itself felt temporary. Small mistake. Large cost. That is the first weight in this story. In Cherokee country, the warning is not that the woods are always dangerous. The warning is that they occasionally become different in a way older people recognized quickly and visitors often ignore. When that shift comes, you leave with your pride intact, or you stay long enough to lose more important things. Stay with Kewohi for another moment. A school group on a mountain trail should be one of the safest arrangements a person can imagine. Because there are numbers, adults, a marked route, a known destination. and the quiet confidence people borrow from organized outings. Yet the National Park Service record for Trenny Gibson reduces all of that structure to one spare fact. She disappeared as the group hiked back from Andrews Bald Trail to the parking area. Back to the parking area, those words matter. They mean the hard part seemed over. They mean the descent or return had already begun. Conversation had probably loosened. Attention had likely widened. And each person could feel the day closing into the ordinary next step of finding the bus or the car. That is exactly the stage when people stop treating a landscape as active and begin treating it as already finished with them. Polly Melton's record is just as plain and just as severe. She was last seen on the Deep Creek Trail, walking ahead of her companions at a faster pace. No cliffs had to split open. No storm had to announce itself, and no one had to be days from help. One person moved a little faster than the group in a famous park, and the gap became permanent. There is a reason elders build warnings around small separations instead of large disasters. Most people never get the chance to make a heroic mistake. They make a casual one. They step ahead because they feel strong. Hang back because they want one more look at the water. Or drift sideways because the woods seem harmless at that exact moment. Then the harmless moment closes. You can hear the old instruction underneath each file if you know how it speaks. Keep the line unbroken. Keep the group visible. Keep your own confidence under suspicion when the place grows too quiet or too easy. A trail does not have to look dangerous to become the last clean place someone was seen. There is also a physical reality behind the silence that helps explain why so many traditions treat it seriously, without reducing it to one. Cause. Birds stop vocalizing around predators. Wind shifts can flatten insect sound. Fog and terrain can absorb or redirect noise until a familiar path feels sealed off from the wider world. The body notices that subtraction fast, and older people learn not to argue with it. That does not reduce the warning. It sharpens it, if silence can mean the environment has changed before you understand how. Then leaving at the first unnatural quiet is not primitive thinking. It is an efficient response to incomplete information in a place where delay is expensive. The elders did not need laboratory language to know that a forest sounding wrong often means a human being should stop adding themselves to the problem. The same logic governs child safety in native communities and in every serious outdoor culture that lasts long enough to learn from loss. Children are kept close, not because adults want to spoil wonder, but because wonder widens distance before judgment has fully formed. A child hears a sound, sees a flash of color beyond spruce, notices berries, water, or a deer trail. And 1 second later, the adult voice is behind brush instead of beside them. That is all it takes. This is why so many warnings sound strict to outsiders. They are written against the smallest opening in attention. Do not wander. Do not answer. Do not whistle. Do not chase the strange sound. Do not let the person in front disappear around the bend. Those are not theatrical lines. They are repairs made in language after earlier harm. Move west now into Dene country, where the land opens and still finds ways to keep sound from behaving the way you expect. Your road can run for miles past sandstone, juniper, dry wash, and distant mesas. And the openness itself may fool you into thinking nothing can hide there from earshot or sight. That assumption has misled people for generations. There are people alive right now who still repeat the rule without embarrassment, because they have seen what darkness does to judgment in open country. A person gets out to look for livestock, to check a tire, to follow a dog, to answer a call, to locate a relative overdue by half an hour. And the next decision is made in a silence too large for good thinking. That is when inherited instruction does its quietest work. North in Anishinaabe Canoe country, the same severity appears in a different shape. Water carries sound across distance, portages break group spacing, and tree cover can make late afternoon feel like evening long before camp is reached. A paddle slips, a boot turns on wet rock, a companion rounds the point first, and the whole world becomes one voice calling through timber and across black water with no clear direction attached to it. Again, the old lessons: do not waste time on theories. Keep together. Keep relation. Do not let hunger, cold, pride, or isolation separate you from the group mind that keeps people oriented. The warning lives because the country keeps producing the same test in different forms. And the one elder line worth holding in full is almost too plain to impress anyone who has not needed it. You should never ever whistle at night. That sentence sounds small until you place it where it belongs. In a landscape that can take one unnecessary sound and turn it into a chain of wrong choices. The Navajo Nation stretches across Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah, more than 27,000 square miles. And the old teachings attached to that land are often as direct as any ranger notice. Navajo historian Wally Brown puts one of them in the plainest form possible. You should never ever whistle at night. No ornament. No wink. The instruction is easy to laugh off if you were raised to treat all taboos as equal. But not all taboos do the same work. Some preserve ceremony. Some preserve kinship. Some preserve life in places where distance, darkness, weather, and uncertainty can compound in minutes. A whistle carries. At night it carries farther than your own sense of scale. Across wash bottoms and rock faces, a human-made sound can travel, reflect, and return from the wrong direction. In a place where people already know that sound can deceive. Adding your own signal to the dark is not bold, it is foolish. Now place that next to the silence rule. First the insects fade, then the night sounds thin out. Then you decide to whistle because you want an answer, or because you think another person is near, or because you want to test whether the shape on the ridge is only an animal. You have just replaced observation with invitation. This is heavier than the Smokies because Dene warning tightens the line even more. In the Appalachians, a person may still imagine they can read the woods well enough to continue carefully. In the high desert and canyon country, the teaching says do not begin the exchange at all. Do not answer. Do not call. Do not make yourself part of the sound pattern once the land has already shifted around you. Your flashlight does not fix that. Your phone does not fix it either, especially where service drops and map screens hold an old confidence long after the ground has stopped deserving it. A point on a screen can make a person believe they are oriented when they have only become more committed to continuing. Modern missing person work across Native communities has its own language now, and much of it concerns the brutal reality of missing Indigenous relatives, delayed response, and the need for families and volunteers to search when institutions fail them. That is a modern crisis with human causes. Still, inside many of those communities, older land instructions remain active because they address the moment before a person becomes a case file. The key is that the warning comes before the event. Whistling at night is not forbidden because every whistle ends badly. It is forbidden because the cost of being wrong in the dark is too high. And because people who knew the country best saw no virtue in testing places that had already told you to stop. That is discipline. There are canyons on Dene land where a call seems near and is not near, and tree lines at the foot of slopes where a single branch scrape can sound like a footstep. There are roads where headlights make distance look flatter than it is, and washes that seem passable until rain upstream rewrites the ground in minutes. Ordinary details. Wrong decision, no clean explanation afterward. That is why these teachings travel well beyond one tribe or one region. They are less about a monster in the abstract than about an environment turning uncertain in a recognizable sequence, while a human being keeps trying to convert warning into information. If you demand proof from a place that is already telling you to leave, you have misunderstood the order of survival. Go north now into Anishinaabe country, around the Great Lakes, the lake forests, the long winter routes, the dark water, and the spruce and pine country where sound can carry oddly over muskeg, snow, and black timber. The Ojibwe live across a broad region in the United States and Canada around the Great Lakes, including Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Ontario. Your vacation map may call this canoe country or cabin country. That is not the whole description. In Ojibwe teaching, warnings do not always isolate one behavior as if safety were a single trick. They attach danger to appetite, imbalance, winter, greed, isolation, and the loss of right relation to land and kin. The point is not merely that something is out there. The point is that people become available to the wrong thing when they stop honoring the conditions that keep them human and connected. That is one reason Wendigo stories endure. They are moral warnings, yes, but they are also wilderness warnings about what happens when hunger, cold, separation, and disordered thinking begin to change the world around a person. In Northwoods country, that can happen quietly. Notice the pattern already forming. Cherokee instruction says, do not keep going when the woods feel wrong. Dene instruction says, do not answer, and do not whistle into a night that is already thinning out around you. Ojibwe warning teaches that isolation and imbalance make a person easier to claim, easier to draw away from ordinary relation, easier to lose from the shared world that should have held them. Different language, same direction. A forest does not need to contain anything supernatural for these teachings to remain severe and accurate. Birds stopping can indicate a predator, a shift in weather, or a disturbance you have not yet identified. Silence can travel faster than your understanding of it. The body often registers that before the mind does. Older people notice because they are trained to notice. They know the baseline hum of a place, the regular complaint of jays, the scratch of insects in warm grass, the evening timing of frogs, the way wind should sound in certain trees and not in others. When all of that drops out together, they do not begin an investigation. They change behavior. That is the cross-tribal pattern worth keeping. Native warnings about wilderness are often treated by outsiders as symbolic stories in need of decoding, when in fact many are already decoded for anyone willing to hear the verbs. Turn back. Stay together, do not separate, do not answer. Do not call back, do not follow, do not test the silence. Short commands, big survival value. Your own outdoor culture sometimes teaches the opposite. It praises curiosity, rewards the better photo beyond the marked path, and flatters the idea that experience alone can compensate for a place you do not belong to. It tells you that preparedness is gear. Native instruction usually adds another layer. Preparedness is obedience. There is a hard dignity in that. A person can carry a compass, a satellite device, extra water, a topographic map, and a bright shell jacket, and still make the first fatal mistake by arguing with a warning they already felt in their chest. Knowledge is not always accumulation. Sometimes it is refusal. This is where the story becomes less comfortable. When the same kinds of instructions appear in Appalachian coves, Dene Night Country, and Anishinaabe North Woods, the outsider can no longer dismiss them as one local habit. A pattern this broad suggests that people who lived close to dangerous land arrived at remarkably similar rules because the land kept teaching the same lesson. Leave before you need a reason you can explain to someone else. That rule sits uneasily beside modern disappearance files, because many of those files begin with a person doing the exact opposite. They continue when something is off. They separate for only a minute, They answer a sound with a sound. They go just ahead, just behind, just over the next rise. Just off the path where the footing still seems easy. Then the file begins, and the explanation never fully does. Now come back to the Smokies, for the case that fits the old instruction too closely to brush aside. June 14, 1969. Spence Field, along the Appalachian Trail in Great Smoky Mountains National Park. A family outing, daylight, a father, a grandfather. Children playing, and one boy in a red t-shirt and low-cut Oxford-style shoes. Dennis Martin was 7 years old, according to the National Park Service incident report. He was last seen around 4:30 in the Spence Field area after he and other boys decided to sneak up and surprise the adults. The other children went one way, Dennis went another, and that was the last time he was seen. Nothing about that setup sounds impossible. It sounds American. It sounds like the kind of harmless family moment that happens every season in your parks, where children dart a little too far around shrubs and return laughing before anyone reaches the count of 10. This time he did not return. By nightfall, his grandfather had gone out to notify rangers. Weather turned hard, and one of the largest searches in National Park Service history began to form. Over the next 2 weeks, thousands of man-days were spent, and at peak force about 1,400 people searched the area. That number should settle something in your mind. This was not a lazy response, not a thin effort, not a case forgotten, because the terrain seemed hopeless from the first hour. Rangers, rescue squads, special forces, National Guard personnel, volunteers, and others worked a landscape that should have yielded some stable answer. It did not. The old warnings matter here, because Dennis was not in remote mythic wilderness when he vanished. He was in a known place, on a family trip, in a field area beside one of the most famous footpaths in America. Familiar ground, small separation. Then absence. A storm struck the night he disappeared, dropping heavy rain and driving temperatures low enough to turn discomfort into danger quickly for a child. Streams grew rough. Ground changed. Search conditions worsened. Every practical factor lined up to erase traces just when the adults around him were trying to create them. That is the official part. There is also one detail that only increases the unease. During the search, a small footprint matching the style of Dennis's Oxford shoe was reportedly found on one side of the mountain and dismissed because other children had been in the area. Then the search moved on. Leave that there. Another report came later from a man who said he had heard a loud scream in the woods on the day Dennis disappeared. Rangers did not treat it as decisive, and they had reasons to be cautious with delayed reports. Still, a scream remains a scream, even when it solves nothing. What does the old instruction say in a case like this? Not what caused it, because the point of the warning is never to satisfy later curiosity. It says do not separate for even a playful reason, when the ground is already complex. It says children should not be sent around blind cover in country that can take one line of sight and break a family apart. It says ordinary moments in powerful landscapes deserve more respect than visitors usually grant them. Dennis Martin's disappearance changed search and rescue thinking in lasting ways. That is one of the documented outcomes of the case. Procedures improved because a park, a family, and hundreds of searchers had to face the fact that a child could vanish in a known zone and leave almost nothing reliable behind. But that institutional lesson sits beside a much older one. Native warnings had already been saying for generations that there are moments when the land shifts from companion to hazard before any human system can describe why. Modern search doctrine starts after separation. Elder instruction tries to stop the separation from happening. There is no need to force this case into mystery theater. A child disappeared. Weather complicated the search. Terrain hid what needed to be seen. Time widened the wound. Those facts are enough. And still, when you place the file beside the warnings, the fit is uncomfortable. A familiar place in Cherokee homeland. A brief break in sight, massive search effort. No clean answer. The old people would not have needed a theory before telling you the same thing they told before the park had formal boundaries. Keep the group tight. Respect the place. Leave when the place changes. Do not let one small gap become a permanent one. The final wait is the simplest, and for that reason it stays with people longer than any dramatic theory ever does. The warning is still active, right now. Your park brochure may emphasize waterfalls, overlooks, wildlife viewing, and trail difficulty, and it should. Your phone may show loop routes, parking lots, review photos, and the average time other hikers took to complete a trail. None of that cancels the oldest measurement in the woods, which is whether the place around you still sounds alive in the ordinary way it did 10 minutes earlier. Silence does not always mean danger. That would be too simple, and older traditions are usually sharper than simple rules. What matters is sudden silence, localized silence, silence joined to a wrong feeling. Silence that arrives with a call you cannot place, a movement in the edge of vision, or an impulse to keep going purely because turning around would feel embarrassing. That combination deserves obedience. The National Park Service tells visitors not to hesitate to report someone missing and reminds people that turning around and getting back to civilization sooner than expected is better than the alternative. That is sound advice. It also happens to sit very close to what native elders had already been saying in their own terms for a very long time. Turn around early. That is not weakness. It is a decision to value your life over your itinerary. Stay on the path even when the shortcut is visible. Trails exist because generations of feet proved those lines again and again. While the spaces beside them keep their own counsel, one person stepping 10 yards into timber is a detail. 3 hours later, it can be the only detail anyone has. Stay together when your group begins to spread. Families and friends separate casually because the trail is easy, the weather seems mild, and the car is only another mile away. Then one person stops for a photograph, another pushes on. A third turns back to check a map, and the clean line of responsibility is gone. Too common. Do not answer every sound with your own sound. In your forests, a human voice can travel strangely. In canyon country, it can bounce until direction becomes false. At night, a whistle can invite confusion, even before you attach any deeper meaning to it. Old instruction does not require a debate over causes. It only requires humility. Do not let familiarity deceive you. The most dangerous trail for many people is not the hardest one, but the one they believe cannot possibly hurt them because they have walked versions of it before, because children are present, because the route is popular, because the weather at the parking lot was pleasant, because their state park or national park has railings and signs and rangers. Safety theater. A place can be managed and still remain wild enough to keep its final say. There is also the matter few people like to admit. Some landscapes affect thinking before they affect the body. Fatigue, thirst, cold, altitude, heat, monotony, darkness, overconfidence, and mild panic can all begin to narrow judgment, while a person still appears outwardly functional. That inner drift is one reason elder instructions are so brief. They are meant to be usable when your mind is already becoming less trustworthy. If the birds stop and your skin tightens for no reason you can defend, that is enough. If your child says the woods sound wrong, that is enough. If an older person in your party says turn back, that is enough. You do not need a committee. People often ask for a single explanation that can sit over all of these warnings like a roof. Predator nearby. Weather shift, acoustic distortion, human threat. Spiritual danger, simple panic. The truth is that the warning survives because it covers the entire range without needing to sort it out in real time. Whatever the cause, the correct response is still departure. That is why these teachings belong to survival, not entertainment. They are efficient. They do not waste words because the land does not waste consequences. Think of how many disappearance files begin with a sentence, so plain it barely seems to deserve attention. He walked ahead, she lagged behind. The child was only out of sight for a moment. The group expected to meet at the car. The trail was familiar. Conditions were normal. The person was almost back. Then think of how many old warnings are built to interrupt exactly those moments. Do not separate. Do not answer. Do not call back. Do not keep going when the forest has already withdrawn its ordinary voice. The match is hard to ignore. And there is one more uncomfortable point. Modern people tend to trust official boundaries too much. A national park line, a trail blaze, a campground post, or a parking area camera can make the entire surrounding landscape feel domesticated. It is not. These are administrative markings laid over older terrain with its own behavior, its own weather, its own sound, and its own refusal to care whether a person arrived with reservations confirmed and snacks packed. Native elders understood that because they learned land as relationship, not backdrop. A place fed you, guided you, exposed you, warned you, and if disrespected, took from you. That is a sterner model than recreation, and a more useful one when something in the woods goes quiet too quickly. So return to the opening scene. A marked trail. A turnout damp pine. A child near the map board. A couple adjusting day packs. Maybe a dog shaking water from its coat. Everything visible is still ordinary. Only now you know that the ordinary part is not the whole record. The place may belong to your weekend schedule, your family photo, your retirement road trip, your favorite overlook, or your annual walk in October. But it also belongs to older warnings that were never withdrawn. That trail can remain easy. The rule remains hard. If the sound leaves first, you leave next. That is the knowledge most people were never taught. Even though the people who knew your forests longest said it as plainly as they could, not as myth, not as performance, as instruction. And if one day your own familiar woods fall still around you in the middle of a bright afternoon, with no clear reason and no bird willing to finish its song, you will know that the silence is not empty. It is the oldest warning in the place, waiting to see whether you were finally willing to hear it.